Welcome to the Lifestyle Chase. This podcast features high performers who have found a way to live their best life while balancing their health, wellness, friends, and family. Proudly hosted by me, Chris Little. Without further ado, let's get started.
Here we are for episode 16 of the Lifestyle Chase podcast, and I have with me today Amber Kupina. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
So, how's your day going so far?
It's been a nice, relaxing day. Normally I get up and go to the gym, but today I decided I would sleep in. So I've kind of just been coasting this morning, waiting for you to get here.
Nice. That's awesome. Take us through your busiest day of the week.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm lucky in the sense, actually I wouldn't say lucky. I feel I've really created an amazing schedule for myself where each week can look pretty different. I usually try and do clients 4 to 5 days a week. I would say that Monday is maybe my favorite day of the week, which is something that I don't think you hear very often. People don't like Mondays for some reason. I would say Mondays are usually my busiest day of the week. I used to take 5 clients a day. Now that it's winter, I'm really kind of like a bear and I like to slow things down. So I am taking about 3 clients a day, and right now I'm doing 3 days a week. So I am fortunate enough to be able to create that. So depending on my day, it'll be like wake up, go to the gym, meditate, prepare for clients, and then I'll do 4 sessions. And then once that's done, it's winding down for dinner and waiting for my husband to get home.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if we took a time machine and we went back like 5 years, what would your day look like?
Oh my gosh, I was unhappy 5 years ago. Maybe not 5, actually that's a lie. Not unhappy. I was doing something I didn't love. I was serving, and that was a full-time thing for me, which to me wasn't fulfilling. It was more of like this is the way I make money. 5 years ago, I was kind of beginning to really become aware that what I wanted to do was something bigger with my life and understand spirituality or understand consciousness or energy and why things are the way they are. And so 5 years ago is when I knew that I wanted to shift in what I was doing, but my full-time work was being a server, which was not in full alignment, but it did get me to where I am today. So there is times that I'm very grateful for what it did for me.
So what would you say was your TSN turning point for when you decided like you had to make a change, make that shift?
I began to experience anxiety, which was, for me, it's not something I dealt with. So I was like, what is happening? People talk about anxiety all the time, and I didn't understand what I was experiencing or why it was there. So I wanted to look at, okay, why am I feeling this way? And I realized that being in an environment where it was predominantly alcohol consumption or sometimes drugs or whatever, it felt heavy to me, and it was like, this is not who I am, and people thought it was weird that I was interested in meditation or healing. So for me, I was like, okay, I gotta look at why I'm having anxiety. So when I started asking myself questions, I began to realize, okay, my anxiety is actually a symptom, it's not a problem. So when I looked at it as a symptom of something maybe mental or emotional or spiritual that I was going through, I was able to look at, okay, my soul isn't in alignment with what it wants to be doing, with what it wants to be experiencing. So that was when I decided to really take full leap on self-development, taking courses, and then eventually it led me to the healing work that I do now. But basically when I started experiencing anxiety, I was like, okay, anxiety is not going to be my life, and I'm going to figure out what is happening, why it's happening, and change that.
Nice. Was there any sort of pushback, like going into something like energy healing? Not everybody's going to buy into it, just kind of the way people are.
Right.
Was there any people who were really opposed to it?
Well, at first, my family was a little, not my sisters, my mom at first, which is funny because now that I talk to her, I think it was also a hidden belief that she had. My dad still doesn't necessarily believe in what I do, but I mean, he grew up in a different time than I did, so I can't expect him to understand. A little bit, I would say I was called weird. I was called not fun anymore. Because when you want to meditate instead of going out, people are like, what's wrong with you? Or you want to eat healthy. So there was times where my friends were a little bit confused or thought I was different all of a sudden. So I would say there was some experience of feeling alone, but I also knew that I had to follow what I was going through and what I knew that I needed to do, because what I currently was doing was not working for me. So I knew that I had to change. And, I think with anything, you're going to experience a little bit of both the support and the criticism. I think with anything that you do, you're never going to have 100% support, which is kind of the way things are. So yeah, I did experience that, but it really shifted into a really positive experience for me once I pushed through it.
Yeah, so like as things progressed, has the support kind of evolved? Like you probably gained a lot of like solid support, you'd say?
Yeah, it's once people saw the change in me, they really understood that what I was doing was clearly working for me. I went from, you could say I was very insecure, I was very jealous or competitive, and competitive in the nature of like I wanted to be other people, or what I wasn't enough. And so I think once people realized that I was shifted from who I was to them, I showed up differently. I mean, there are people who you could say I was not friends with, and now I talk to them regularly, or they have become a part of my life. And I think that because I changed, it allowed a dynamic to change between people. So yeah, I mean, now I feel really supported in what I do.
That's good. In doing your healing, have you found you've created big change in the people closest to you? Like have you had an effect through your passion on people close to you?
Absolutely. So I see the interconnectedness of all things. So everything influences or has a ripple effect. And I really saw that in my own life, especially with my family, is my sisters are also doing healing work. So the more that we did healing work, the more that our family began to heal. So I saw a lot of shifts, specifically in my dad. I used to call my dad like a hard ass, and he was mean, and he never listened, and he never was compassionate. And now my dad listens to me, but it's also because of what I've done and how I've changed and grown that it's allowed him to change and grow with me without him even doing any of the work. So I've seen tons of people, friends, family, even my clients, the more that I grow, the more that they grow.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So going back to your childhood, I ask a lot of my guests kind of different qualities that they were as a kid and different things that their parents put forth that molded them into what they are. What would you say are 3 qualities of you as a kid that are still in alignment with you as today?
I would say I am like a introverted extrovert.
Okay.
Is that how it's one of, like, that saying? I can't remember how
Like
it's
on a playground, how would you be? Would you be like asking everybody to play tag, or would you just find the tire swing and just spin around?
There are times where I'm very outgoing and times where I'm very reserved. As a kid, I think I developed strong suits to make myself feel maybe more comfortable, and one of them was being outgoing and playful. I'm very silly, I'm very childlike, and that's something I would never want to lose. It's really a part of who I am. I love talking in different character voices. I love like playing around and goofing around with my sisters, even my husband. Like, I am totally childlike, and I really love that about myself. So I would say that I'm still playful like I was as a child. I am still quiet and outgoing like I was as a child. And I'm an overthinker like I was when I was a child, which I think most people can relate to, is learning to move from the mind and back into the experience. But yeah, I think those would be 3 qualities.
Makes sense. And sometimes, like, I find with a lot of people through fitness, through wellness, all those industries, when we're most anxious is kind of when we're drifting away from one of those qualities. Mm-hmm. Which of those would you say you drifted furthest away when you felt anxious?
That is a difficult question. I think there was a few things that I drifted away from. One was like that intuitive inner knowing that I was doing something that wasn't fulfilling or wasn't aligning with my deepest needs. As well as when I became a healer or called myself one, I was very intimidated or felt like I couldn't be childlike and playful because I needed to now have this healer persona who's like calm and relaxed all the time, which I am both. So I had to realize that it's okay, I'm still playful and childlike and consider myself a healer. So I had to realize that I didn't have to only be one thing. I could be all the things that I am. So when I stopped or was trying to mask my playful side, I think that was when it was like, oh, I'm not expressing myself, I'm not being me. And I had to remember that it's okay to do that.
So just kind of contrasting from trying to match an image of what you think it is to just following your gut and being what you feel.
Totally. And I mean, as a healer, there are times where I don't fit the stereotype, or people are like, why is this young white girl doing it? So I've been asked that before. So there are times where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm young. You know, I've been called a millennial. So is all of a sudden that not okay? Like, do I have to look a certain way to be a healer? Do I have to be a certain race to be a healer? So I went through that as well, where I was questioning, like, if I fitted something that people believed was a healer. So I had to go through my own healing journey on that too, because, you know, we're coming through an age where people are really becoming aware of things that need to heal, or just even dealing with their emotions, or understanding that their emotions and what they're going through is okay. So that was one thing that I totally went through, with not feeling fully accepted for what I looked like or my age.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So going back to your parents now, what are 3 qualities that you could pick up from each parent that you would say you embody now?
Oh, I feel like I'm so different from my parents.
There's always something. You have to dig deep sometimes.
Totally.
But there's
My mom is very nurturing, and I believe I'm very nurturing. My mom is so supportive, and she shows up, and I believe that I've embodied showing up for people. From my dad, I really think I developed independence from him. So I used to be mad that I had to work for things when I was younger, or that he instilled work ethic in me. And even though my work ethic didn't show up maybe the way other people's has, or the way that he thought it would, but he really instilled that, like, if I want something, I have to create it. And I think that I've done that.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How did you know that Jessie was the one for you?
Oh, I knew immediately. I went to Central's grand opening on December 14th of 2012, and I went with a friend. And it's funny, this was when I was really kind of meeting more spiritual people, and she was my first spiritual friend. So she called me and said, I'm getting this feeling you're supposed to be with me tonight. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go wherever you tell me to go. She's very intuitive. So I went with her, and she took me to Central's grand opening, which at that point, I didn't even know that place was open. So I went with her, and then we spent the evening there. And at the end of the night, Jessie was sitting at the table right behind us. So I had talked to one of the managers that night, and I was like, we're currently working at a different restaurant that I hated, so I knew I needed to make a shift. I was like, I'm going to work here. So I had decided that that's where I was going to go. And then someone introduced me to Jessie, and I turned my head and I looked at Chelsea and I said, I'm going to marry him. It was just kind of looking at his eyes. It was kind of that, I wouldn't say love at first sight. It really felt like I'm remembering, like I knew him already on some level. So it was the moment I met him that I knew he was the one. And then a year later, we ended up starting dating.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
I like that. So there's like a little bit of a spark.
Totally.
Cool.
Yeah.
With your healing practice, who would you say that you look up to the most? Pick 3 people, because it would probably be easy to pick one, because I know you have like your mentor that you learn a lot from. But let's pick 3.
3 people, you bet. I would definitely say my teacher, Pete Bernard, is my number 1. He really kind of found something in me that I didn't know. And he is just, like, he was trained when he was 8 years old. So he's really embodied the work and lives it. So he was my number 1 inspiration for sure. And are you asking like more people in my life, or
it could be people in your life? It could be people in that industry. Just people who make you become better at being spiritual or aware of your energy kind of
Okay.
thing.
I would say my sister Lindsay is another one. She kind of also guided me into this path a little bit. And since I mean, she's the person I call and go to for most things. She's my support system. She's the one person who I swear I can tell her anything and she already understands it on like a level that nobody else could. So she really inspires me. And the third person, oh, there's just so many people. I have to say my husband, which might seem cheesy, but since I've met him, I kind of pushed him into this spiritual world and he like ran right into it. And he's got more of like a yang energy, so he went and did some self-development courses, and I would consider like self-development coaching programs more yang, and spiritual, gentler, emotional healing through yin. So he's very yang, but I love that it brings more yang because I'm very yin. So we're like yin and yang. That's so cheesy, but it's true. So I would say him because he has such an amazing perspective, and I've never seen, like, he cares. Like, he cares about every single person he interacts with. And to see him show up like that for every single person in his life makes me want to show up like that for every single person, rather than just having like a interaction, having a meaningful connection. And he has meaningful connections all day, every day.
Yeah, totally. And it kind of speaks to the point that every interaction that you have with people counts for something.
Yeah.
Like, people will walk through a grocery store and just like kind of glare the whole time, and like you've impacted people's day, whether you want to admit it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you take like the resting bitch face off and you walk through and you're pumped and you're happy and you're thinking good thoughts, you could positively impact a person, or holding the door, stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Like, you can't do enough of that. With talking on mental health, I know that social media plays a big role. Have you found that there's a correlation to social media with the amount of like healing that people need?
You know, mental health is a really big topic. And I think that now we're coming into a time where people feel more comfortable to be vulnerable and share what they're going through and seek out assistance in any type of professional area that they choose. I don't necessarily believe that everyone that has been diagnosed with mental health has mental health issues. I mean, I could have went to the doctor when I had what I would have considered anxiety, and like, it was, to me, it was fear, but it was showing up physically, like physical reactions and the anxiety. I could have totally been prescribed something by going in. And now too, people get prescribed things when they lose a family member, and I think that we don't necessarily need to medicate everything. I think that it's okay that we have emotions, and we need tools to move through them and how to work through them. And I mean, if medication needs to be in your life and it's going to help you through what you're doing, absolutely. I'm not saying anti-medication. I believe that there is multi faceted areas that we can work on it and feel supported, because going through emotion doesn't necessarily mean that you have something. Or, you know, and I've had people in my life who have been, you know, diagnosed with things, and then they have worked through it through coaching programs, through spiritual healing, through yoga, through meditation, and all of a sudden they're like, whoa, I actually don't even have this. Like, it wasn't a thing I needed to move through. I realized what the root cause of it was. So, I mean, I think that it's something that needs to be talked about more, and that we need to understand it's okay to be going through something, and maybe ask more questions about it and ask the whys. What triggered it? Why is it showing up? How many have you felt this before in your life? Because most of the time we've experienced our emotions more than once. That's why you understand that you're feeling fear or you're feeling anger, because it's being triggered. And so all the other times in your life that you've experienced anger, it's lighting up as well too, because your cellular memory remembers everything. So I think that it's such a big topic, and it would be wonderful to see more support in it, in different ways that isn't necessarily medication, and if it needs to be, it needs to be. But yeah, I think there's lots that can be done that haven't necessarily been fully discovered or fully endeavored yet.
Nice. But like, even with going through like a story on Instagram, or do you ever find you get into the newsfeed and then you just can't stop? Or even if it's just like looking at puppy videos, just like 2 hours of puppy videos and then a little baby giggling in between. Because I find I could waste like 2 hours if I don't just chuck my phone across the room. But I also would have to say I correlate some of that, like phone taking you in, like being into this almost alternate reality.
Totally.
With like mental health. Do you ever think it's going to get to a point where we have to limit the amount that grown adults are on their phone? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think technology is wonderful. However, it creates this need to have it now, like instant gratification, that how fast is my internet, like things show up like this. So I think sometimes it now creates that I need everything to show up like this.
Yeah.
And especially in healing, people are like, well, I want to feel it this second. And it has a way of growing out. Just kind of like when you plant a flower, it doesn't grow that second. It goes through its process. So I think that is an issue with technology and social media. I would say I used to be really bad for being on my phone all day. I can honestly say now I actually feel a little bit like it takes a little bit more effort for me, especially these last few months, to actually get on my phone and to stay in contact with people, because it's such a, I mean, we have to stay with the times, right? So now I find that for me, it's pretty easy to like not spend too much time on my phone, especially Instagram. I used to be obsessive with it, and that was when I had a lot of self-worth stuff, so I was like looking for everything and triggering all my wounds. So now I find that there's more things that I would prefer to do, and I think it's honestly just going to come with evolution as a human. And the more that we spend time with technology, the less time we're spending evolving as a being.
I agree. And like with this podcast too, a lot of people, when I'm like asking them if they'll be on, they're like, oh, are we doing this over the phone or what? And I usually try and have it so it's like in person, because I find like having like face-to-face connections and real conversations is just good for people in general. And then for myself, it's kind of like my life hack, because every week I know I'll interact with a human being for like an hour, like a good, genuine conversation. And I think it's such a good way to like maintain wellness, because just like I would go to the gym, you have to like practice interacting with people and learning from them and asking questions and sharing stuff. So like, it's so important. People get on this this route that they need to make everything more efficient. And to make things efficient, they put more things online, or they put things through like Skype calls and stuff. But sometimes we need to like go back to caveman years when we all like huddle around the fire making like a steak out of a old buffalo. I don't know what cavemen do. There's no buffalo. Bad analogy. But we need to go back to the more simple times.
Totally.
Not let our phone screens completely dictate all of our interactions and all of our friendships and stuff like that. Need to go back to basics.
Totally. I think that now using your phone or your screen is a way of actually hiding yourself, and the way that you present yourself on social media, you can, make sure that your makeup's fully done, or that you're ready to go, or that you are presenting yourself a certain way that you want to be perceived. There are a lot of Instagram accounts that are like beautiful travel, and they're sitting in their living room, they're not traveling, they just took a bunch of photos with a bunch of different outfits, and it's not actually what's happening. So I think that we hide behind our screens, and then all of a sudden it's like you said, like when you go to the gym and you see someone, sometimes people begin to feel awkward or uncomfortable, because now it's actually like I'm looking you in your eyes and I'm seeing you, and you don't have a way to protect yourself. So I think that we've really come into an age where technology is a form of isolating ourselves.
It's funny, like I'll have some people that follow me on Instagram, and I follow them back, because like I'm kind of one of those people where if you follow me, I'll generally follow you back as long as I know you're like in the area and not like someplace 2,000 kilometers away. I don't know, maybe not 2,000. Anyways, and I've had it happen like if I'm out in a bar or something, just waiting for somebody, and one of the people who follows me comes up and says, "Oh, hey, I follow you." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Like, I recognize you." And they're like, "Oh, and then I message you sometimes." I'm like, "I know. I message you back." And then, like, it's just they're so timid to the idea of, like, I've already acknowledged them. I consider them a friend, and if I see them, I'll nod and wave. And if I'm having an off day, I might not notice them. But like, if I've interacted with somebody on a social media platform, then I've considered them to be just the same in person too. So if I run into them in Edmonton, then of course I would say hi, and it's not going to be like, "Oh, well, I didn't know about you. Like, I don't recognize you from your pictures," kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so good to have these authentic communications with people.
Totally.
And like, it's funny because Edmonton is such a small city. Like, the more you meet people, the more you realize that it's like that 7 degrees of separation. Like, everybody at least knows one person that knows another person, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good because that's like a supportive structure. It keeps people grounded. It helps them move forward, because sometimes you need to know a plumber, and everybody knows somebody who knows a plumber. So, on to the topic of your healing circles,
Yes.
because I've gone to a few of those and always had a good experience. What was the very first healing circle that you did like? Was it scary?
Oh my gosh. Yes, I was. During the day I felt like oddly calm. Usually before healing circles, I experience nerves and excitement. My first one, I remember being super shocked because I was nervous to do it, and I wasn't even sure, like, is anyone gonna come? And I had 32 people show up to my first one, and I was blown away. I did it in my backyard, and I think I kept it pretty basic on an introduction of myself and awareness and how healing, like basics of healing kind of thing. But I was absolutely terrified. And then as soon as it was over, I had a hanger in my mouth, couldn't stop smiling, and felt like, how have I been avoiding doing this for so long? So it was really a fulfilling experience.
That's awesome. How has it evolved now? Like, I know you have a few different initiatives that you do outside of your one-on-one healing. What other things are you doing these days?
I do the healing circles. I try and do them once a month, maybe once every second month, depending. I do space clearings, which is going to your home, your business, or land. It's kind of like when you are in a house and you are like, "Ooh, it feels weird," or "I don't like it here," or you run up the stairs as fast as you can because something's scaring you in the basement. You don't know what it is. I go to the house and I heal the space. So because everything is consciousness, it lays down imprints and energetic imprints. So if there has been, let's say, abuse in the house carries that. If there's been bankruptcy, it carries that feeling of like failure or fear or loss. So sometimes it's too why houses won't sell is because people walk in and just the consciousness of it is subconsciously felt by the person and they choose not to spend time. It's why sometimes in certain businesses, like you'll see buildings, they're flipping constantly. There's something happening energetically in the building that is not sustainable for success. So we heal the blueprint of the house and we can create the energy of what it is that the person wants in the home or the building or space. So I do that. And then I also work on animals, which is one of my favorite things to do. I worked on a dog yesterday. So usually I will travel to the animal. Odd time, I will have a distance session where I work on the animal from here. I've worked on animals that aren't in Edmonton. So because everything is energy, the energy can transmute and hit the animal, not hit, but like be transferred to the animal quite quickly. It's kind of like how we don't really have to wait for the light. The light is just here. So I do that as well. And I've worked on horses, I've worked on cats, I've worked on dogs. And usually those are the animals that people come to me with. My teacher works on snakes, which personally I would not like to. But yeah, so that's mostly what I do is one-on-one sessions, healing circles, space clearings, and then animal sessions.
Nice. What's been the most fulfilling session that you've had with an animal?
It had to have been, there's been a few. Can I share a few? Do you mind?
Yeah.
So one, I have rescue Shaggy. He wasn't ever trained, and he's 5 years old. So it's kind of difficult to train a dog when they're that old. So he was pooping and peeing in the house, and as you know, it's not wonderful when the animals are doing that, and you take them outside and they just stand there, and then you come in the house and they go pee. So I did a session, and animals respond so quickly that usually they actually only need like 10 to 20 minute sessions. So it took me 10 minutes. I did a behavioral correction with him, and now he goes to the bathroom outside, which is amazing. So that was really amazing because it also made my husband super happy.
No kidding.
And also with Frank, he was in the hospital. He was suffering from pancreatitis. So I did a session on him. I asked people to send blessings to him, and I had another healer do a session on him at the same time around the same time I did. And the last time he had pancreatitis, he was in the hospital for a week and a half, and it was, as you can imagine, very expensive and very emotional. Mm-hmm. So we did this session on him, and the next, like within 8 hours, they called us and he was doing better. So he responded really quickly. So that was really fulfilling as well. I also worked on a rescue horse that had experienced abuse, and seeing like the horse like leaned into me and put its weight on me, and seeing it go from a space of fear to trusting someone it's just like something you can't even put words into. It's just filled with love and compassion and gratitude.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then you talked about like space clearing and like houses and stuff. Have you ever worked with a realtor for that kind of stuff?
I haven't. I've considered doing that. I've never really spent time reaching out to them. Jesse has like mentioned it to his friends, and I think that eventually it might be a thing, but as of right now I haven't done that yet.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Just like totally popped into my head. I was like, wow, like if that actually sold a house, like realtors would be all over that.
Yeah, I know. There's a woman she's not in Edmonton, but she does it where she'll do a space clearing, and then if the house sells in, I think it's like 4 weeks, she gets a certain percentage. So she does it for free. And if it doesn't sell, doesn't. But she's never had a house not sell.
Nice.
So it's pretty cool what energy does, because we feel it all the time and we forget because we don't necessarily tune into the space around us and what it's creating for us.
Well, I know there's at least one realtor that listens to this podcast, so I'm really inspired.
There we go.
So, on the topic of, well, actually, I think I saw in your story you were healing a baby recently.
Oh, yeah.
So, how does a baby's healing process compare to an adult's?
Babies are also like animals where they don't need as long of a session. They don't have the same way our mind gets in the way. So if someone comes to me for a healing, they might leave and be like, well, did that work? Is this going to happen? What if this happens? What if I still feel this way? And I kind of go into that thought process, which can slow it down. Babies and animals just experience. So depending on what I'm working on, I mean, I've worked on children from distance most of the time because they usually don't like to sit still. They like to play around and move. So usually I will work on them, and then they integrate the healing when they're sleeping. So it depends on what they're experiencing. A lot of the time, I mean, parents sometimes want to fix their children or change their child's behavior. And I usually like to recommend that the parent maybe looks at themselves, because if we can change, then our child can change. And the child usually isn't the issue. Sometimes it's just nice to work on, if their child is having like maybe physical issues with health, then that's when we'll go into it. But more often I will recommend that the parent does some work. And then if needed, we'll work on the child.
Makes sense. And like that's a good way to see it, because I've seen some really good commercials where they show like a kid with bad behavior.
Yeah.
But then they show what the parent's doing, and the parent is actually doing just that. So the kid's only doing what they're seeing the parent do.
Yeah.
And so totally, like, if there's something to be fixed, it might as well start with the parent. They're setting the example.
Yeah.
What has been the most profound change that you've seen with, like, an adult that you've done healing with?
The most profound change. I really also believe that the subtle changes are the most important ones. I mean, we've healed physical health issues that are maybe said that they cannot be healed, or nothing can be done about it. So seeing physical things shift for someone is really amazing. I love seeing people go from a state of fear or feeling rejected or feeling alone or not good enough, moving into feeling comfortable with who they are. Because they're going to have a big impact on the world when they show up and be who they are meant to be and make the impact that they are meant to make. So I've seen, it's really hard to narrow it down. I've seen people, I've had clients come in with nightmares. They have recurring nightmares every single night, and we do one session and their nightmares are gone. Or healing. My sister had really painful eyesight, so whether she's wearing glasses or not, her eyes were sore. And if you can imagine, like, if you've had a sore eye, it's not fun to spend your day looking at things. So she had really painful eyes. I didn't work on her, someone else did, and her eyes were healed after one session. People, it's just unbelievable what we can do, and I really believe there's no limit to what we can heal. The limit is your belief system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever had somebody come into a session and just not buy into it and then they leave unchanged?
Yeah. I mean, I've had skeptics come in, and if I'm really asking a question, and if they're really a skeptic, why are they here? If they really don't want healing, why are they here? Mm-hmm. So most often I haven't had someone be like, oh, I hated that, it was terrible. I mean, I haven't. Or if they have not said it to me.
Yeah.
Most often I have people feel something or feel different. I've had people be like, I don't believe in energy work, and then they get it done. They're like, I actually could feel everything that was happening. So I can't say that I've had an experience where someone has left unchanged. I believe that something always occurs, and it might just be subtle and they just don't know it yet.
So, in a lot of times, and I could probably speak to this because from my experiences, I found the more calm and grounded I become, the more amplified the healing circle or whatever it is becomes. I'd have to say a person that was reluctant on healing or reluctant on the effects of healing would probably see the effects, but it would just take a while to sort of transition. It would take some time for them to actually get into that place for them to be ready for the change.
I mean, I can't make someone change.
Yeah.
I always say that I'm not the one healing you. I'm facilitating the process, and you're healing yourself. So, I mean, there are people who maybe they don't want to give up their issues. So if they're maybe angry or resentful, or they don't want to let go of something that's happened to them, that can totally get in the way of their healing, because you still have to choose it. Healing is a choice. So usually I've had experiences with people where at first they're reluctant, and then they experience something and the experience opens them up. And then it's just learning to change their behaviors and their way of being so that they can continue the process. And they're like, oh, I keep trying to stop myself from healing. I keep trying to be angry. I keep wanting to be mad at someone. So it begins with the awareness that they have. So they can show up reluctant. If they stay reluctant, then there's not much I can do. But most of the time people end up breaking open.
Makes sense. So for our listeners that don't quite know what your healing looks like, you don't really use crystals so much, do you?
Not really.
Yeah.
I used to really be fascinated with crystals. I do have crystals in my healing room. They're more so for the amplifying effects. So crystals are amplifiers. So whatever you're experiencing, they will amplify it. So it's kind of like I made that joke on Instagram, if you can remember a while back, where Spencer Pratt has all these crystals on him and he's super angry. He's like vibrating, and his friend's like, they're not working. He's like, I know they're not working. That's why I have hundreds on me. And it's funny because he has all these crystals on him and they're just amplifying his experience. So healing, they do have healing qualities. They have a healing structure, but I believe that they are a tool, and if you hold a crystal, it's not necessarily going to change your life. You have to be a part of the process. So I don't use them very much. I use stones, which generally I earn them all through ceremony and through my training with my teacher. So stones are grounding, and they help that kind of earthing, rooted feeling, as well as pulling the energy. So it's kind of like that support system rather than necessarily feeling the amplification.
Cool. Yeah, I just oftentimes, because I'll tell other people, like, I'm like, hey, I go to like these healing circles, I've had a session with her, like I've actually found it to be really helpful, and then they'll always create their own image of what it's like. They're like, oh, I just sprinkle some crystals on you and says, oh, have a good one, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to make sure that listeners sort of understand like what the experience is like. Something really cool. I was looking back in my calendar from last year. I think it was like last December 21st. I got to come in for a session with you, and I was still at my old job.
Yeah.
So working full-time at the warehouse, and I just remember feeling really heavy and just like lots of tension that day. And I didn't really know what kind of an effect a healing session would have on me. And so this is kind of how it went. I got here, I was like super nervous and started the healing session, just lots of like breathing, focusing on that. And as it kind of went on, well, actually, like before, we chatted back and forth about some things that I wanted to work on. And I never realized how helpful it was to really just call out those things that I wanted to work on. And started breathing, and then I found like I sort of fell asleep right away. And I just remember like every so often I'd wake up like sort of twitching or whatever, and it felt like I had a lot of like pent up negative energy. And then after, I felt like $1,000,000.
Yeah.
So like I can speak to the effects of it, and it is a very difficult thing for a person to buy into, and especially with there's not too many personal trainers that do this kind of stuff. There are a lot, but it's something that there is always going to be a bit of like reluctancy to buy into it. But for myself, going into my transition into the fitness industry, like it totally helped. It helped me have a clear head and just kind of think more clearly about like what I needed. And from that point, it was like February when I left my old job, and now I'm a contractor for a gym. I basically run my own business. Like I'm all in.
Which is what you wanted to do.
Yeah. So like I would have to say it works.
Yeah.
Like,
that's so good.
it's helpful. And then when the healing circles come around, I usually kind of check advances coming, because like there's not too many dudes that go to them. And I'm like, I go to tons of spin classes, so I'm used to going to things where it's like 90% girls. But when there's other guys, then it's a little less intimidating. But the healing circles have always been good too, and I just think it's something that is fun to bring attention to, because it's something that has helped me. It's not something that everybody will be able to work with, because they have to buy into it. They're kind of doing the work on themselves, sort of, as you say. But it's been just such a helpful facet. Like if you're feeling heavy weight from anything in your life, it's good. What has been the biggest obstacle that you've overcome with healing?
Well, there's so many things that I've overcome. I used to have a lot of, not health issues, but I got sick all the time. I had digestive issues. I had cystic acne. So I healed a lot of physical things that seemed impossible, or that doctors just told me that's just a part of my makeup. So realizing too that like my acne was related to, self-worth and my anger and my digestive system was related to past life karma. So I went through a lot of physical changes. I went through a lot of emotional changes. I used to feel very uncomfortable speaking to people. I felt really awkward. I felt like I would honestly try and hide. Like if I saw someone I knew, I'd move the other way. And now I like move towards that person. So I really seen changes in just how I feel free to be in life. So that sense of freedom and self-expression and just allowing myself to experience life rather than trying to hide from it was a really big change for me, which I think, a lot of people experience it and sometimes they're not even aware that that's what they're doing. So what I've learned through healing is everything is consciousness. Everything is a rate, a frequency, a vibration, and it slows down into matter like the physical. So I've learned that because everything is energy and consciousness, it can be shifted. It can change. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to stay the way it is. So being able to know that there's unlimited potential that we can tap into has transformed my life. It has allowed me to create the things that I never thought I'd be able to create. And I've seen myself grow so much that it's hard to narrow it down because I just feel like I've grown into this person that I wanted to be and felt like I couldn't be before. And I also just wanted to clarify, people always ask me like what it is that I do. So people always ask me if I do Reiki, and I don't do Reiki. I'm trained in shamanism, so I work with consciousness and energy medicine. So I have different medicine rights that allow me to work with different types of energy or different types of forces. And a lot of what we do is healing through consciousness, where we go into your subconscious mind and I make you do the work to heal and change it. And then we also do energy work. So I've really realized that there's so much that we can tap into within ourselves. Kind of like how if you look at even at science, when you look at our DNA, there's 98% of it, they don't know what it does. They know what 2% of it does, and they call it junk DNA. And that 98% is like, there is information there that maybe we just can't tap into or we haven't figured it out. It is related to our ancestors, our hidden talents, our past lives. It's got like everything that you have been, will be, and that is within you already. So being able to tap into this divine intelligence that is already within you and creating the life that you want.
I like it. And I like that you brought up the Reiki thing because basically this is my main experience with the healing, but every time I tell somebody I'm going to like a healing circle, they're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. It's Reiki. I'm like, it's not Reiki.
Yeah.
But it's just because it's not a very common thing for people to go and do, they just kind of pick their one thing that they know about it and just call it that.
Yeah, Reiki is like one of the most well-known forms of healing or spiritual or energy medicine. So it is really, people are more aware of it. Mm-hmm. I've been trained in animal healing. That was the first thing that I did. But I just say that just because I don't want people to think that I'm doing something that I'm not doing.
Yeah.
And that they know where my training lies. I also am like, I'm a big, like, you need to be trained in what you're doing. Like, personal trainers don't just guess and self-teach themselves and then go take clients. They understand what the physical, like the anatomy, they understand what is good for the body or how to work with certain bodies.
Exactly. Yeah.
We don't needle ourselves. We let acupuncturists who are trained to do it. So I really believe that training matters. So I'm super grateful that I have my teacher and that I get to work in the shamanic world. Yeah.
That's awesome. For 5 years down the road, what do you foresee yourself doing? Is it going to be like the same thing? Do you have like goals? What's your future like?
I have lots of things that I want to be doing. Time frame, 5 years, I will definitely say that I will be having children. I have always wanted to be a mother. And I will hopefully have a book written. That's another thing that I want to do. And continue teaching. I want to teach more. Yeah.
That's awesome. What's your book going to be about?
I have a couple of ideas going. I want to have one that's based around healing and like the basics of healing and a little bit of what I've learned through it. And then another one is going to be about relationships and how to create a relationship in your life. Jesse and I get messages all the time because our relationship is truly amazing. So I would love to share how, Jesse and I previously in our relationships before each other, I wouldn't call them healthy. I would call them very wounded and unhappy. So I would love to write a book on relationships and how to really show up so that your relationship can be what you've dreamed of.
Do you have a strategy for how you're going to do the book? Because I know a lot of people, I've got, I think my episode 2 guest, whichever episode it was Mike Macapinlack. He has authored, I think, 5 books now.
Wow.
And his strategy was basically just, instead of just thinking like one day down the road, I'm going to do it, he would just like lay out a certain amount of time, write out a certain amount of words, and just like hammer through it.
Yeah.
Do you have a strategy? Do you have like a deadline that you have to have a book out by this date?
I used to. I honestly thought I was going to have a book out this year, but I did not spend enough time writing. I have them started. I definitely know like my relationship book is going to be kind of like you work through it. Like I'll give you assignments or things to work through on your own so that you can become aware of your patterns and then how to change them. So I have a little bit of a strategy laid out. I have some of it written, so I remember when I was writing too, I was like, I need to do this more. So that is something I'd love to have done within the next 5 years for sure.
Perfect. You should definitely like set a deadline. Make yourself accountable.
I know.
This
Now that
is
I've said it here, I've got more people that'll be holding me accountable.
This is the moment where your butt got kicked into gear.
Exactly.
Like, damn it, I have to write it now.
I said it, totally.
Stupid Chris. Would you have it released on Amazon? Would you want it published?
I have a friend who just self-published a book, so that's something I would consider. I would love to have it published. I would love to have it in bookstores. Like, I would love to see it in chapters. Yeah. I would love that. So, I mean, I'm not going to limit myself to a certain company. That, Hay House would be amazing, but I'm going to see what I can do on my own and see what the universe brings me.
Totally. Like, even if you just start with like the ebook and then just like push for whatever you can get.
I was gonna start by creating like a workbook. So maybe it would be shorter, like 30 pages, and that would be something that maybe could be purchased online. And then using that to expand into my book. So I've got a few ideas rolling. It's now just time to sit down and do it.
Awesome. And now you're held accountable.
Exactly. I'll be hearing from you soon, I bet.
So at the healing dinner that you had, and that food was awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
It's funny because like Vance and I loaded up on beets, and we were both panicking the next day because beets.
Yeah.
I was like, am I dying? And then I looked in the Instagram story, and he was like, I thought I was dying.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, both of us. But in any case, there's a lot of like chit chat going back and forth, and I think I heard you say that you might consider doing sort of like a podcast, but like a recorded meditation thing.
Yeah.
Are you ever gonna do it?
I want to design a meditation for sure. I believe that meditations, like my teacher, his are like scientific in the way that he does them, and they're very like well laid out. So if I did a meditation, like I want it to be really well done. So that's something I would want to do. I've been asked to do a podcast. I've been asked to do like YouTube videos. So I need, like, there's just so many things that I want to do right now that it's totally hard to fit like all my clients and all of it in one day. Plus I like to take care of myself and meditate and read or whatever. So it's definitely something I want to do. Like creating a meditation is probably the first thing that I would want to do, and then expand from that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good to hear. That was just another accountability piece that
I know.
Fit in there.
We'll see.
And like, to be quite honest, like you're seeing how this podcast is done is pretty simple. Like for myself, I think I pay about $130 a year for mine to be hosted.
Right.
But there's also ways you can be hosted for free. Usually the trade-off is they'll cap you at a certain amount of time, or they'll throw an advertisement on there, or they won't let you be the author of your content. But I chose this option because then if somebody wants to talk to me on my podcast for 3 hours, then I'm good.
Right.
And I never have to worry about like some third-party advertising being thrown into my podcast. And if it ever got ranked up high, like my podcast got ranked 34th in Canada for fitness and nutrition for a day once.
Amazing.
So that was kind of cool.
That is amazing.
So when it gets ranked up there, then it shows me as the author rather than like the content host.
Right.
So then that's sort of like a point of pride for me. And I took it as like an investment. Basically, this is sort of like a self-development piece for me.
Right, you want to own
Because,
it.
well, yeah, like I'm owning it, but then also every guest that I meet, whether they're like super wise, whatever thing that they're into, whether they're a teacher, whether they're a healer, whether they're another trainer, everybody has something to offer. Even like if I chat with my nieces, they're just little kids, and I could talk to them for an hour and I'll learn something from them. Like that's why interaction is so helpful. So in me getting this hour each week, give or take, that's sort of like me paying for personal development. It's worth
Totally,
it.
absolutely.
So we're going into our very last question.
Okay.
And this is something I ask all of my guests. What is the one piece of advice that you would give someone on how to authentically live their life to the fullest?
I would recommend being gentle with yourself and allowing yourself to follow that calling and that burning that you feel in your body. Kind of like how you probably felt when you wanted to do this podcast, or when someone wants to dance or write. Like, listen to what your body is telling you, because we seek out external validation and information all the time. And that's something that, like, clients will come in and they'll ask me to read them. That's not what I do. I don't read you. I don't want to read you. I want to help you become aware of who you are. So investigate yourself, act like you are the journalist of your life, and find out why you are the way you are, and then change what you need to change so that you can become who you want to be.
That's awesome. I love it. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.